The rain battered the windshield, cascading down in torrents, as Ethan Calloway tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The usually composed and methodical billionaire was on an unfamiliar stormy road thanks to an unexpected detour from a blocked highway at 41 ETH. Ethan prided himself on control over his business, his surroundings, and most of all his emotions, but night, the chaos of the storm, mirrored the unease stirring in his chest as the headlights cut through the downpour. A figure emerged on the side of the road. A woman stood hunched over, drenched, cradling what looked like two small bundles. At first, Ethan thought it might be to free from the storm. Moran animal caught in the chaos, but as she's lowered it became clear it was a mother with two newborns. What on earth, he muttered, pulling to a stop a few feet ahead. His initial instinct was to drive past. This wasn't his problem, he had no business getting involved, but something about the way the woman clutched the babies here, eyes wide with desperation, rooted in place against this better judgment. Ethan rolled down the window. Are you all right? Called out, his voices sharp against the sound of pounding rain. Please, the woman whispered, barely audible. My babies, they're freezing. Ethan's gazes shifted to the bundles in her arms, two tiny faces barely visible beneath the soaked blanket. His chest tightened as she realized the urgency of her situation. He hesitated only a moment longer before unlocking the passenger door. Getting the woman didn't wait for a second invitation. She stumbled into the car, her trembling hands tightening around the infants, the interior filled with the scent of rain and exhaustion. As Ethan glanced at her, she was Bailey here, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and her damp hair clung to her face. Where do you live? Has his tone clipped. You don't have a home, shed admitted, her voice trembling. Please, I just need to keep them warm. Ethan inhaled deeply, his frustration rising. He had spent his life avoiding complications. He was offering shelter to a stranger. All right, I'll take you to my house. There's food, heat, and dry clothes. Her lips parted in a gasp of relief. Thank you. I don't know how to save it, Ethan interrupted, pulling back onto the road. He wasn't looking for gratitude. He just needed to get this situation under control. The grandeur of Ethan's estate loomed in the distance, its lights piercing the dark night. As they arrived, the mansion's iron gates opened with a groan. Mary and Foster, the longtime housekeeper, was already at the door, her sharp eyes widening as she saw the drenched mother and her babies. Miss Calloway. Marianne's tone was a mixture of shock and concern. What's this? They need help, Ethan said simply, ushering the woman inside. Had turned to Marianne. Get blankets and something warm to eat. Marianne nodded, though her gaze lingered on the young mothers. He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Ethan and the woman alone in the vast living room. The fire crackled in the hearth, but the tension in the air was palpable. What's your name? Ethan asked, his voice soft now. The woman hesitated before replying. Lila Harper. And there she gestured toward the babies. She glanced down at the sleeping infants, Amelia and Oliver. Ethan studied her, searching for answers in her weary expression. You're going to have to tell me how you ended up on that road. Lila's voice faltered. I had to leave for them. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Something about the fear in here. Yais told him it wasn't the right time. Rest first. The steadily weak talker. Miranda returned with blankets and a tray of soups, setting it down with practiced efficiency as Lila fed the babies and sipped the soup. Ethan watched her closely. There was something front and yielding about her, a quiet strength that intrigued him. Marcella and the babies were settled in a guest room. Ethan pulled Marianne aside. What do you think? Marianne frowned, her usual composure shaken. I think there's more to her story than she's letting on, but those Ice, they're innocent. Miss Calloway. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. Keep an eye on her. I'll make some calls tomorrow. Marianne nodded, her expression thoughtful. There's something familiar about her, though. I'll try to remember. Ethan's brow furrowed at Marianne's cryptic comment, but it didn't press. Instead, he retreated to his office. The image of Leia and the babies etched it in his mind. Something about them stirred emotions she thought they had long buried as the storm outside began town. Ethan stared out the window, his thoughts racing. He didn't know Hatha had just invited into his life, but for the first time in years she felt something other than cold detachment. He wasn't sure if it was hope or trouble. The sun barely peeked through the heavy clouds, the next morning casting a pale light over Ethan Calloway's estate. He sat at the dining table, his coffee untouched, as his mind churned over the events of the previous night. It wasn't like him to invite strangers into his meticulously controlled world. But something about Lila Harper and her two fragile newborns had stirred a part of him, a thought that long been extinguished. He was lost in thought when Marianne Foster appeared, her usual composed demeanor ordined with hesitation. Miss Calloway, she began, her voice soft. Miss Harper, as she's feeding the babies in the guest room. Ethan nodded, his gaze distant. Good, keep her comfortable. For now. After a pause, you mentioned something last night about her being familiar. Have you remembered anything? Marianne hesitated, wringing her hands, a raw display of unease for the seasoned housekeeper. Not yet, sir, but there's something about her. I can't put my finger on it. Ethan's sharp eye studied Marianne, but they decided to let a tress let me know if you'd upstairs. Lila Harper sat in the guest room. The babies nestled against the rass. They fed the soft cups of Amelia and Oliver, filled the otherwise silence, bringing a faint smile to her face. But even as she held her children, her mind raced. With the storm had passed, but the shadow of her past still loomed large. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She looked up to see Ethan standing in the doorway, his tall frame outlined by the morning light. His presence was commanding, but there was a gentleness in his expression that surprised her. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice calm but firm, lilac edge shifting to make room on the edge of the bed. Ethan stepped inside, his gaze briefly flicking to the babies before settling on her. "How are they?" asked, gesturing toward the twins. "They're better," Laura replied softly, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Thank you for everything." Ethan crossed his arms, leaning slightly against the dresser. "You don't have to thank me, but I need to know what happened. Why were you out there in the middle of the storm?" Laura hesitated, her grip tightening on Amelia and Oliver. For a moment it seemed like she might refuse, but then she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I was running," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "for my husband." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "David Hugh, not a good man," Lila said, here yes, darting to the window as if expecting to see him lurking there. "He controlled everything, my life, my choices, even my thoughts. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought maybe it would change him, but it only made things worse." Ethan's expression darkened, his fingers curling into a fist. At this side, Howley hesitated, her voice trembling as she spoke. "He hurt me not just with words but with his hands, and when the babies were born he said they were a mistake, that they were ruining his life." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, determined to stay strong. "I couldn't let them grow up in that environment. Oh, I waited until he was gone, and I left." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Ethan's chest tightened as she processed what she had endured. He had heard stories of abuse before, but seeing the pain in Lila's eyes made it feel alt. "Hemorrhage real, you did the right thing," Ethan said finally, his voice is steady. "Noon deserves to live like that, and your children, they deserve to be safe." Ella looked up at him here, yes, shimmering with gratitude and fear. "But he'll come for," she whispered, "he'll ways." Does Ethan straightened his gaze, unwavering. "Another, I'll make sure of it." Later that day, Ethan called his lawyer, Robert Gaines, and explained the situation. Robert, a practical and resourceful man, didn't waste time. "We'll need to take legal steps," she said. "File for a protective order, document everything. And I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to keep tabs on her husband." "Do it," Ethan replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. By the time evening fell, the mansion had transformed into a quiet sanctuary. Marianne had prepared a hearty dinner, and the warmth off the fireplace cast a golden glow over the living room. Ethan found himself seated across from Elath twins, asleep in a crib nearby. For the first time, La seemed more relaxed, thought the shadows under her eyes told him she hadn't truly rested in weeks. They talked quietly, their conversation gradually shifting from the heavy truths of her past to lighter topics. "Your house is beautiful," La said, glancing around the room. "It's so peaceful," chuckled dryly. "Peaceful is one word, empty is another." Ela tilted her head, studying him. "You live here alone?" "Just me and Marianne," Ethan admitted, "and it's been that way for a long time." La hesitated, sensing a story behind his words, but she didn't press. Instead, she offered a small smile. "Well, it doesn't feel empty." Now Ethan's gazes oftened as she looked at their Astra, warmth spreading through his chest. For years, she had kept the world at arm's length. But in that moment, he realized he didn't mind the change. As the night deepened, Ethan stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching La tuck the babies into their crib. The sight was simple yet profound, a reminder of everything she had fought for, and everything he now felt compelled to protect. "You don't have to worry anymore," he said quietly. "You're safe here." Hirla looked over her shoulder, older, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Thank you, Ethan, for giving us a chance, Hanadi." This voice firm, "You deserve it," as she walked away. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years she felt ready to face it, not alone but with a purpose. The next morning, Ethan Calloway stood on the balcony of the morning sun, casting a golden hue over the sprawling estate. He sipped his coffee, his mind restless. Lila Harper and her twin had brought a whirlwind of change to his once quiet life. For the first time in years, she found himself thinking less about board meetings and more about a future filled with possibilities. Thought the shadows of her past lingered. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Moran Foster entered, her usual calm demeanor shadowed by concern. "Miss Calloway," she hesitantly, "I have news." Eth set this cup down, his posture straightening. "What is it?" Marianne hesitated before answering. "Robert called this morning. The investigator found something troubling about David Harper. Ethan's jaw tightened at the mention of Layla's husband. Goon, he's been spotted near the town. He's looking for her. Ethan's into fist. She had prepared for this possibility, but hearing it confirmed sent a surge of protectiveness through him. Double the security around the estate. I want every entrance covered. Marianne nodded. Already done, sir. But perhaps you should speak with Miss Harper downstairs. Lassiter on the living room floor, playing with Amelia and Oliver. The twins giggled, asceticaled their tiny feet, their laughter filling the room with warmth. It was a sound Ethan had never heard in his home before, a sound he realized hadn't want to lose la. He said from the doorway, his voice drawing her attention. She looked up, her smile fading when she saw the seriousness in his expression. What is its Hest? Pulling the twins closer instinctively, Ethan stepped into the room, his gazes. Teddy David's in town. The investigator confirmed it this morning. Leia's face paled and her grip on the twins tightened. He found us, she whispered, her voice trembled. Lingno said firmly, crossing the room to kneel beside her. He hasn't found you and he won't. I've increased security around the house. You and the twins are safe. Here tears welled in Leila's eyes, a mix of fear and gratitude. Ethan, I don't know how to thank you. You've done so much already. Ethan reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. You don't have to thank me. I promised I'd protect you, and I intend to keep that promise. For a moment, their eyes met, and Leila saw something in Ethan's gaze she hadn't noticed before. Something that made her heart race as the day wore on. The atmosphere in the mansion remained tense. Marianne stayed close to Leila, offering her comfort and helping with the twins, while Ethan worked tirelessly to ensure their safety. By evening, he had made a decision. He found Leila sitting by the fireplace, the twins asleep in their crib nearby. She looked up as she entered, her expression questioning. I've contacted my lawyer. Ethan began, his tone resolute. We're filing for our restraining order against David, and if he comes near you, he'll be arrested. La stared at them, her emotions overwhelming her. You're doing so much for us. Why, Ethan? He's irritated, then sighed. Because I care about you and the twins. You've been through so much, and you deserve a chance to rebuild your life. I want help you do that. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. Ethan Isha paused, gathering her thoughts. I don't know what the future holds, but I know it feels safe with you. You've given me hope when I thought there was none. Ethan stepped closer, his voice as often, and you don't have to face this alone anymore. We'll face it together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and quiet moments brought Ethan and Leila closer together. Their restraining order was approved, and David Harper was warned to stay away. Thought the threat wasn't entirely gone. Leila began to feel a sense of security she hadn't known in years. Ethan too found himself changing. The walls he had built around his heart were crumbling, replaced by a warmth he hadn't felt since he was young. He spent this evening playing with Amelia and Oliver, their laughter filling the house and his heart, and every moment with Leila felt like a gift, a chance to build something real. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Ethan joined Leila on the back porch. She held Amelia, who was dozing, in her arms, while Oliver slept in a bassinet nearby. The soft glow of the sunset bathed them in light, and Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. La said, his voice low but steady. I've been thinking. She turned to him, here expression curious. About what about us? Admitted, his gaze unwavering. This house, it's never felt like a home until you and the twins came here. I don't want that to change. Leila's breath caught in her throat and her heart raced. Ethan, what are you saying? I'm saying I want you to stay, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Not because you need my protection, but because I want you here. You and the twins, you've brought life back to this place. And to me, tears filled Leila's eyes as she looked at him, her heart overflowing. I want that too, she whispered. Ethan smiled, Aryan and genuine smile that lit up his face. Then let's make it happen. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Ethan reached out and took Leila's hand in his. In that moment, they both knew they had found something worth fighting for, a future filled with love, laughter, and hope. Thank you for joining us for this heartfelt journey on Heartfelt Stories. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For more tales of hope, love, and redemption, where are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for more incredible stories. Redart.